And we are back here on I-24 News. This is our U.S. special election show. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for sticking with us. Well, in Donald Trump's first term as American president, he showed strong support for Israel with recognition of the Golan Heights and the decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. But perhaps his most significant move was one of his last in office, and that was the signing of the Abraham Accords, which brought historic peace between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. But the question now is whether or not he can pick up where he left off. And we have more in this report by our Joe Brown.
In September 2020, on the White House lawn, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu signed an agreement with the foreign ministers of the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, normalizing ties between Israel and the Gulf countries for the first time. This agreement, known as the Abraham Accords, was widely lauded as one of Trump's greatest foreign policy moments, and one which he said he would like to expand on.
We would have had 12 to 15 countries within a period of, literally within a period of a year, I think, at the most. If I win, that will be an absolute priority, just getting everybody in.
But the Middle East has changed a lot over the last 4 years, with conflicts shaping the region. So can Trump build on the Abraham Accords in his second stint in office? And if so, how? From the Israeli standpoint, there is a willingness to improve relations with its neighbours.
I
aspire to continue the process I led a few years ago of the signing of the historic Abraham Accords and achieve peace with additional Arab countries. In the Abraham Accords, we achieved 4 peace treaties. And I underline peace for peace, peace of strength, with important countries in the Middle East.
But it's not that simple. Before the war with Hamas, US President Joe Biden was trying to outdo his predecessor and successor Trump by brokering a deal with Israel and the largest Arab nation, Saudi Arabia. This normalization was in return for a security agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia. The sticking point on the Saudi side was that Israel had to recognize a Palestinian state, which the Israelis refused, leading to the deal failing. But now, reports are circulating that Washington and Riyadh are in talks for a separate security deal, one that doesn't include Israel, and they will rush to finish this before Trump takes office. But with the wars in Gaza and Lebanon raging on, and regional stability on the knife edge, the president-elect wants to not only build on his old legacy, but create a new one with long-standing peace that has evaded the region since Israel's inception.
I want to see the Middle East get back to peace, and real peace, but a peace that's going to be a lasting peace, and that's going to happen.
All right, well, turning back to our guests in the studio, we have former Israeli ambassador and congressional affairs liaison at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. That's Yoram Ettinger. We have our Middle East correspondent Ariel Oster on with us, and our correspondent Zach Anders as well. All right, so all eyes on the Abraham Accords now. This is, finally kind of a discussion that is being renewed, you could say, with Trump's victory. The question is whether or not Trump will be able to clinch a victory or a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because we have obviously seen in recent days, just yesterday, reports of Saudi Arabia signing some, security agreements with the Biden administration right now, and that has been without the involvement of Israel. And basically, what Trump had been pushing for was that in response to, or as part of this deal, and getting kind of a mega security deal with Saudi Arabia, they would have to establish peace and normalization with the state of Israel.
I'm thinking back to one of the opening moments of Trump's first term back in 2020, when his first trip, I believe, was to Riyadh.
2016, yeah.
Yeah, and right after that came a massive announcement of security assistance. And I think that's something to watch for again this time, is if there, maybe there's not a need now that's a 10-year, it was, I think at the time, a 10-year deal worth billions of dollars. But certainly some immediate assurance or guarantee coming from the U.S., you would think, in the opening days. That's how he operated in 2020. Maybe we see that again in 2024.
Saudi Arabia wanted a security deal with the United States, and the United States kind of threw in the option of also bandwagoning normalization with Israel. Initially, before October 7th, before Arab public opinion shifted very sharply against those notions, Saudi Arabia was open to that, but they still wanted to see some movement on the Palestinian arena. Now, following October 7th, with images on Arab media showing day-to-day the destruction in Gaza, the Saudi position has shifted towards complete statehood, really limiting their capability of negotiating or compromising regarding what their preconditions are for normalization with Israel. And indeed, there is the option that Saudi Arabia and the United States will go ahead with a deal, a bilateral deal that will not include normalization with Israel. That would be a big miss for Israel, and it would have to see when, talking about joining the normalization train. So if this doesn't happen, it's not clear when the next station along the road will be.
Now, Netanyahu and his government do not want to establish a path towards a Palestinian state. That has been made clear in the rhetoric of many of the officials within his coalition. So how will Trump essentially be able to get them on board to secure a deal with Saudi Arabia if that is, of course, his plan? And we know that he very much wants to make that happen.
Opposition to the establishment of a Palestinian state has been a permanent feature of every single pro-American Arab regime, especially Saudi Arabia. They talk the talk, but the walk since 1948 has been anything but step towards establishment of a Palestinian state, whether it was Jordan that occupied Judea and Samaria, but it never occurred to them to make it a Palestinian state, whether it was Egypt who occupied Gaza and declared nightly curfew and prohibited any Palestinian political activity. And the fact is that 6 peace treaties between Israel and Egypt, Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and South Sudan were not preconditioned by the Arabs upon establishing a Palestinian state. Israel has pretty good commercial and defense ties with Saudi Arabia without peace treaty. Those ties were never preconditioned by the Saudis upon establishing a Palestinian state. And the reason the Saudis make it clear that they do not want a Palestinian state, irrespective of what they say, is that they know the track record of the Palestinian leadership, which transformed the Palestinians into a role model of intra-Arab terrorism, intra-Arab subversion, intra-Arab ingratitude, and we have seen that in Egypt in the 50s, Syria in the 60s, Jordan in 1970, Lebanon during the 1970s, and Kuwait when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August of 1990. At that time, the most hospitable, the most generous Arab host to Palestinians. And what did Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas and the PLO leadership do? They collaborated with Saddam Hussein's plundering of Kuwait. The Saudis realized that a Palestinian state would only add fuel, not water, to the Middle East fire.